Every Invader Zim fan knows about the image called Bloody Grr. You've probably heard that he was a joke, right? Put there to get back at Nickelodeon Studios for censoring them so much. The image was slipped into a couple of frames of a few episodes and was so faint, he couldn't even be seen unless you paused the show at a certain frame. This image is no joke though. I was there at Nickelodeon Studios when Bloody Grr was made. It was the final episode called Final Doom. Jonin and the crew knew the show was going to be cancelled and were working on Bad Bad Rubber Piggy when they found out. They had about 14 more episodes to go, so they made the final episode early and thought it would be a big middle finger to the network to have this grotesque image in it. I don't know how they thought this final episode would get aired though, because people like myself view the episodes first before they ever air. I kind of wish I hadn't because I'm still a bit rattled by the experience. The episode started as normal as any. The intro had no audio and was really choppy, which I expected that because episodes tend to come back a little glitchy and need some fixes before actually airing. It opened with a shot of the sky and the title appeared on screen, Final Doom. Then the camera lowered down to look down on Zim's house and zoom in. The next scene showed Grr with a taco as usual, Zim staring at him across the room. He stared for an uncomfortable amount of time, like the same shot was being shown but it was actually zooming in on Zim, but so slow that it was hardly noticeable. After a couple minutes, Zim walked over and slapped the taco out of his hand and announced he didn't want stinky human food in the house anymore. I thought Grr would ignore him as usual and go about his merry way or maybe have a comical tantrum, but I was wrong. Grr stared at the taco on the floor for a long time. I began to see a theme in this episode. However, during this staring, I could hear something in the background. It was screaming. It sounded like a man being tortured. It was too real to be a voice actor. And even though it was barely audible, I felt like the sound was coming from right next to me. Grr's eyes turned red like he was in duty mode and evil music started playing. He reached back and slapped Zim out of the way before taking off and bursting through the front of the house. At this point, I looked around at the other people watching this because all this seemed off, really off. Just the whole atmosphere of the episode was wrong. Everyone else looked as puzzled as I was. The episode cut to Dib, sitting on the ground outside crying about something. He had his hands over his eyes and was sobbing loudly. Like it was so loud we had to turn down the speakers to save our ears. You could probably guess what happened. This episode had a habit of letting things go on for an uncomfortable amounts of time. This went on for a while before the scene just cut to a few seconds of static. When it returned, Grr was there in front of Dib. There was no audio now. Grr said something to Dib and Dib turned away. It now showed Dib and Grr standing behind him while Dib talked. Dib finally raised his head up and took his hands away to reveal he had no eyes, just empty black sockets behind his glasses. He flopped down on the ground wailing. Grr looked unmoved by whatever Dib was saying. This was about the time we started hearing that man screaming again. And since there was no audio this time, I was perfectly clear that's what it was. This was clearly a man in true excruciating pain. We didn't have a lot of time to think about it because the audio was back and the scene abruptly changed. Now, quite full of static, it was in Professor Membrane's lab. The animation was really choppy again. The lines and colors was there, but it was all stills like an animatic. The music was disturbingly out of tune when Gur busted through the ceiling of the lab, holding a bloodied up dib in his claw, entrails hanging out of his stomach and leading up to, in Gur's other claw, a taco shell. Membrane looked up, looking unbothered, but the scene froze there as the audio continued. Membrane said, well, at least it wasn't gas. From what we could hear, Gur screamed and flew over and beat the shit out of Professor Membrane. However, we got a quick flash of the aftermath when it was over. We had to pause it on the frame because it was so fast. It was a single frame of Professor Membrane laying on the lab floor, blood trickling from his head and making a small pool on the floor. His goggles had been ripped off, revealing his eyes for the very first time, frozen in look of shock and horror. His arms had been ripped from his body and stripped of all their flesh. His chest had been opened up and Dib was stuffed inside. A couple people in the viewing booth threw up and asked to leave. I and a couple others stayed. When we played it again and the animation was back to normal, it was clear again. The view was on Gur flying out of the ceiling at the lab at full speed, it blowing up in the background. Then there was a sharp static sound before it cut to Gaz's bedroom. Gur was standing there with a very unsettling look on his face. Gaz looked just as pissed as ever. She said, "What are you doing here?" Gur's hand turned into a buzzsaw blade and he made his evil grin. He took a swipe and for the first time Gaz seemed weak. Her usual demeanor was gone, like she wasn't instilling fear in the universe anymore. This wasn't like Gaz. Normally in this situation, she would coolly kick the blade off his arm and beat the shit out of him. He took another swipe and caught her neck. She gasped for breath, which turned into gurgling quickly. Blood sprayed out of her throat and onto Gur, covering him in blood. He let it drip onto his taco, which was now showing it had strips of what assumed to be pieces of Membrane's arm meat. It now showed a full body shot of Gur, completely covered in blood up and down. There was a low moan coming from the speakers and a disturbing gradient background behind him that kept changing through the whole shot. The shot lasted what seemed like hours, but it was probably only a couple of minutes. The most disturbing part was that this didn't even seem like part of the show at all. Like the whole episode was meant just to show this one shot. The screen faded to black and it appeared to be over. We started to get up and leave to go to vomit, but then there was a loud screeching coming from the speakers. We turned down the sound, but it did no good. We just had to sit it out until it was over. The screen came back showing a loop of Gur flying through the night sky, blue eyes completely clean, bobbing up and down as he flew. This went on for about 30 seconds before it cut to Gur busting another hole in Zim's wall right next to the one he made earlier. Zim was frightened at Gur's appearance, now covered in blood, and Gur again, "Gur, what is this? You're covered in human juices." Gur replied and said his first line in the whole episode, still in duty mode. "Yes, my master. I stopped getting human food and started making humans food. I am programmed to eat human food in either sense of the term." It was now showing Gur's point of view with the HUD display and targeting system. He was targeting on Zim. Zim was wearing his human disguise. The target spawned a dialogue that said, "Hair, eye, pupils equal human equal master equal food. Likes wearing pants." It cut to showing the outside of the house right by one of the windows. You can hear the buzzsaw blades again, and Zim screaming, "What are you doing, Gur? Gur, Gur, no!" Before he's silent and green liquid splatters the window and it fades to black again. It was black for a very long time, so we assumed it was over. But there was one last thing before the tape actually ended. The last thing we were assaulted with was a final flash of the bloody Gur image with the words, "Nick will perish." Alright guys, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you guys have, be sure to drop a like, hit that subscribe button down below, leave a comment in the comment section down below telling me what other videos you guys would like to see, as well as the link to this story will be down in the description, as well with my Instagram and my Twitter and my Snapchat. Be sure to go follow me on all those. It's a really good way to interact with me, and I'm sorry I didn't upload yesterday. I did, but YouTube glitched up. I deleted the video. Decided I didn't like the video, decided I would record this one, so I'm about to edit this, upload it, and you guys will see it. So drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and leave a comment, and I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for all the support I've been getting. Peace out.